Jason Kidd coaching the Mavericks from your perspective of him coaching the Bucks? How is that going to translate in your opinion?
Well, I would like to hope, or I would like to think that coaches are capable of learning and changing.
That's the answer. That's the answer literally everyone has given, right? Like, it's so true.
You. Preach the gospel.
But I'm not so optimistic that it's going to be the case. I think, we always speak about this, and this isn't an original take of mine, but I thought that from his time in Milwaukee, it seemed to me that the only players that were really able to understand him or get on the same level of him was either a player like Giannis, who is a complete maniac when it comes to working out, living and breathing basketball, wanting to be the best, wanting to be great, or it was players like new assistant coach Jared Dudley, who was an old school player that was fine with, okay, we're going to sprint all day or whatever it may be. We're going to practice for 6 hours. He's old school. He's fine with that. He's been through that. There's just not that many of those players in the league anymore. And so to me, the biggest challenge that it would seem to me from the outside, and I wasn't in Milwaukee when Jason Kidd was there, but just from watching from afar, speaking to people, he's going to have to be better at relationships and better at relationships with different personalities, the modern day player. Because there's no doubt he's a smart basketball mind. There's no doubt about that. But it did seem that the stubbornness and probably not being able to relate to modern day players was his downfall. And I always thought he was a little bit of a Scott Skiles coach in the way that you bring in Jason Kidd, he might have that immediate impact, but then the diminishing returns start to kick in pretty quickly.
It's kind of like a 2-year deal almost, right? Like you bring him in for those 2 years, but after you hold on to him for too long, I'm curious to see how it will last. I'm curious to see how it's going to start to begin with, but even just if it lasts past 2 years, to see how it goes. I think to your answer, I think that's absolutely the case, and I'm so curious. I think Luka, will do fine under him, unless Jason Kidd tries to start like tweaking different things that Luka tries to do, like Carlisle did, and try and control a little bit too much. Then I think we're gonna have a problem. I think Kristaps Porzingis, who is already a big wild card, that is a big wild card for somebody like Jason Kidd. Who are players that you've heard of that had an issue or sort of had problems with Jason Kidd in the past, that you've heard of besides Giannis that maybe clashed with him or something like that?
Who is Larry Sanders for 300?
That definitely one of them.
The Larry Sanders stuff was interesting because it was almost hard to remember that Larry Sanders was on the Bucks when Jason Kidd was there because it was so short-lived to remember back to that time. So it was kind of a weird period for the Bucks. And I will say this, I haven't read the book, and Mirren's great. I remember being in Milwaukee when she was coming through a couple of times, and you wonder what she's up to, wonder what she's doing here. It turns out she was writing a Giannis book, so which everyone says is fantastic. I've got one on the way, but I've heard her speak about the Jason Kidd stuff, and she sort of said, I don't think it's totally fair because people just pull out little screenshots. We know how it works, and then it doesn't tell the full picture. So I don't know what to say about that because I haven't read the book, but I will say this. Jabari Parker was a guy that I know for a fact that didn't handle the Jason Kidd stuff too well. And I remember being in Brooklyn a couple of years ago when Jared Dudley was on the Nets, and I spoke to Jared Dudley about Giannis and how he's grown up as a player from the early days and maturing into a leader, controlling his emotions a little bit better. And we asked about Jason Kidd, and he specifically said, and I'm paraphrasing now, I don't have the quote in front of me, but he specifically said that for someone like Giannis, Jason Kidd was great because he was on his ass all the time. Giannis wanted someone that was like that. That probably helped him. And I think in terms of the freedom that he allowed Giannis to play with that point guard, everyone always points to that, but that was good. I think that there's a case to be made that he was good for Giannis's development, but for Jabari Parker, Jared Dudley said that probably wasn't good for him. He probably had never been in that situation. He'd always been the star. All of a sudden he comes to the NBA, he tears his ACL, and now he's got this guy that's constantly on him. And it probably, as Dudley said, made him go into his shell a little bit. And we know for a number of reasons it hasn't worked out for Jabari Parker, which is, a shame. He was a star or an expected star coming into the league. So again, Jabari, a pretty quiet personality. And that's probably what I come back to when I talk about the different personalities and how he can relate